Hola community, welcome to Blender.Today live from my house. I'm just back, we are just back, the Blender Studio, the Blender HQ, the Blender animation team is back from Annecy. We spent there a week showing what Blender can do. There was Daniel Martinez Lara showing GPENCIL stuff, storyboarding tools. It was just awesome. So we haven't seen each other for a while. Before that, there was the Blender release, and before that, I didn't do the show for in order to prepare for the actual release of 3.2. But it was so nice. It was so nice last week. Thanks for everybody that dropped by the booth at the MIFA in Annecy. For those who don't know, the Annecy Animation Festival is one of the most important animation festivals in the world, and it takes place every year in France, in Annecy. And yeah, the team was there. We had a booth. We showed what Blender can do. But actually, for the first time in so long, because of COVID and stuff, we are back. And there is a huge difference of the last time we've been there. The last time Blender had a booth there was in 2018. And it was a lot of students, because it's an animation festival. There's a lot of schools in France, as you may know, and surroundings. But also it was a lot of freelancers. But this year, I think I counted more studios coming to us, coming to say, hey, I got a studio. We are using Blender. We want to connect with other studios than freelancers. So it is crazy how the adoption that Blender is getting. We even had demos from Ubisoft tools. We had, and I don't know, so many people drop by. So we haven't been talking about what's new in Blender for a while. So let's get to it and just jump to it. User interface. Let's jump directly into what's new in the user interface. The latest big change in Blender. Let me download the latest, because I don't think I have the latest here. I built a list of notes on Linux because I'm at home. I don't know if you noticed. It was a big conference, around like 14,000 people or so. And yep, it's good to stay home if you come after seeing so many people, if you don't want to spread stuff in the office. So that is a good thing. And gizmos. If you have the Gizmo on, you may have noticed that now when you transform, you can actually see where they're going. Yay. The only gizmo that had the option before was the rotation gizmo, but now it also works for scale and for the location. And when you have all of them on, you also should see all of them. So super nice. That's been a request from the community for a while. Oh look, if I move around the window, it actually disappears. Interesting. Okay. Oh, this is super cool. This is actually my favorite UI change of these past few weeks. Is so the commit log commit message doesn't say much. It just says that showing candidates for string properties. What does it mean? Well, it means many things. It means that if you have if you're changing a keymap, for example, Blender will actually look for the operator name when you want to add a shortcut. For example, let's go into the preferences, keymap, and let's try to see or change an operator. So okay, these are the ones that I made. Maybe let's go to global. So yeah, here, click, and you can actually see the available operators. No more guessing. Okay, some guessing, but you can still search, and it's going to use fuzzy search. So you can actually make, like, if I write sequencer with without the U, it still finds it. Nice. That has been a long time waiting. This is my favorite so far. There's still many issues. It is not only this doesn't only affect the Keymap editor. It's actually everywhere in Blender. So here Campbell writes, for example, window manager operators that reference data path expand using the Python console's autocomplete. So whenever you find a data path that Blender can recognize, is gonna show up. The names of keying sets for inserting or deleting keyframe operators as well. That is so cool. That is so cool. 3D Illusion asks, does it warn you when you overwrite another shortcut? No, because it's not a change, as I mentioned, it's not an improvement done for the Keymap editor. It's something more wide that Blender can use everywhere. The Keymap editor, it needs a lot of love. This is not, again, this change is not done for the Keymap editor. It's just it's a side effect, but not a side effect, actually was implemented, but it's one of the many issues that the Keymap editor has that we hope to fix eventually in the near future. Add file operator to, oh yes, another one. If you, I don't know, how is it on Windows? If I'm here, for example, in here and I Control L, it actually works. Control L is a shortcut to edit the path in many systems, on Linux also, and I think on Mac as well. It also works in Blender now. So if you press Control L from the file browser, like if you open a file and you do like Control L, it's gonna like activate the field so you can start typing. We don't have autocomplete here yet, but hey, you can actually type a path more easily. Oh, would it mean that, let's say, okay, I'm curious now. If I have a file open, then I go back, like I go somewhere and I do Control L / enter. Yes, it works. That is a quick way to go into the current blend files folder, you know, like a relative path. So you go // and that's actually what I do with this big button, the current blends folder. This is from an add-on, from the Amaranth add-on that comes with Blender. I added this because I often found myself trying to go back to the original blend file. That's so cool. All right, next. Shaders, tooltips, yay, user interface. We continue in the user interface. So here, Arya Ramati added tooltips for the shaders. So now you can actually get some some important info, or actually useful info. Remember that some months ago, weeks ago, the support for tooltips was added, but of course the work of adding support is one thing, and then you need to add support. You actually have to write the tooltips. So thank you, Ari, for helping out. Remember that anybody can really help on this in the community. It's really not a you need to compile Blender and then look for commit logs like this one to see what is where to play around or to touch these files. Another UI interface for add-on developers mainly. So the child panels, like the sub panels, now can be ordered. They have an order. Usually they get the order on which they are declared. So if you have multiple panels or sub panels, you give them an order, they get registered in that order, so at least you can predict in which order they're going to appear. Now they also support the BL order setting that allows you to override that. Under the hood changes, nothing for the final user yet, but under the hood there is a new grid view that is going to be used for the asset browser and also for by add-ons. It's much more like generic. It supports the like active items, notifiers. It's performant, and hopefully it's gonna make it's gonna be used in more areas in Blender. That's super nice to see. A fix: the NLA strip names are no longer all fudged up. Have you ever had this case when sometimes the strips will, like in the NLA, the name of the strip will just like overflow strips like crazy? Not anymore. Thanks to Colin has fixed this, and now they all fit until there's no more room for them. So yay for that. Then, speaking of flickering, when you shift Shift R is a shortcut to change the voxel size. You may have noticed how it flickers. Well, that's because when there is a 0, Blender will like remove it, like not show it, and then it looks like it's flickering. Not anymore. Now it will have like a fixed amount. There is an option for the operators to have a fixed amount exposed where they can yeah, so the amount of decimals doesn't change. That's super nice. I also like that one change, that one feature. Speaking of features, you can now duplicate the active color attribute layer. So the vertex colors, the all vertex colors, the color attributes, now there is an option to duplicate them. It's an operator. Also accessible via Python. All right, when you change, I see a lot of people changing the font of Blender. Blender comes with a default font, but you can also add your own. When you add your own, Blender used to replace the font entirely. So if your font didn't have some characters, then it will show up like a square or like it would fail. Not anymore. Now, thanks to Harley, there is now a fallback system, basically, where you can use your fonts, and if they are not found, Blender is going to default. If those values are not found, Blender will default to the Blender's internal font, Blender's own font, which is amazing because it means that you can now mix and match, and you should never see these squares anymore, hopefully. So that's a big one. Thanks, Harley. The last one is in terms of UI, UX, or like Keymap. It's that operators that were using the left key modifiers like shift, left, right, shift tilde for fly mode, and so on, are now also, they can now use the right side of the keyboard modifiers like shift on the right, control, and so on. So it's more for consistency from left and right. Okay. Let's talk about cycles. Yes, there is a few changes in cycles. Well, actually, this one is in terms of memory. So if you use nano VDV volumes, there is now an option where you can choose the half precision floats. So you can save memory by having a bit of less precision. But hey, if you don't care about how detailed a simulation is, a volume is, but you want to save memory, you can. It could be also nice for like a simplify option, right? So simplify, where you turn on half float for volumes, but full on for rendering. UDIMs. Have you ever had issues when trying to pack UDIMs? It may have been because the UDIM tile sizes were different somehow. That has been fixed, and now rendering of packed UDIMs with different sizes should work. This one is actually for Eevee and for cycles. It's for both. It's a change that makes it so 8-bit image textures are going to be loaded as half float for some color spaces, not for all of them. This change makes it use a little bit of memory, more memory in these color spaces, but it makes sure that the conversion, it doesn't lose much data. And this applies to non-raw and non-sRGB color spaces. I think like the new Filmic sRGB applies to this. Okay, next. Okay, this is a big one. Performance. And speaking of Eevee, this applies to sculpting with Eevee. You can now sculpt with Eevee, support PVVH, so performance, and it looks good and it's fast, and basically all the good stuff from PVVH now supported by Eevee. So bring them all those demos. Bring them, please. Show high polygon counts, performant Eevee renders and demos. Use hashtag B3D. Next, let's switch topic. Let's talk a little bit about geometry nodes. There's a new primitive, yes, and it's not a mesh primitive or a curve primitive. It's a volume primitive, volume cube. Yay! This makes I think the screenshot says in grid, but I think it should be cube. I don't know which one is more up to date. Like, we can find out though. We can go to the commit, and the commit says volume cube, and the operator, and then okay, it's volume cube everywhere. All right. I could also just I could have come here and just add a new geometry nodes, but I need to have a mesh and volume primitive. Let's just say volume cube. Yeah, I guess it makes sense to have it in the volume category, although if you have more, we should probably make a new core primitive, mesh primitive, and volume primitive section category. What else? New nodes. We have a couple new nodes this week. Both are related actually. One is an input node. It's a field input node. Instance rotation. So basically it gives you the rotation of an instance, and it's a field, so it works like magic. So there is a node for setting the rotation of an instance, but there was no node to actually get the rotation. So that is super welcome. And the same concept applies to the scale node. So there is the scale node, the scale of an instance. You can set the scale, but you can also, as an input node, get the scale, the instance scale, and it's a field again, so should work automatically. What else? Oh, this is also a nice one because it's an improvement to an existing node. The Boolean mesh node now has intersecting edges as an output. It's a field output, so this will give you the resulting or the selection of the edges that are intersecting. So I can imagine already that you can do crazy stuff with it. Oh, nice. Yeah, actually, this is pretty cool. This is a good example. Look, there is a cube and this icosphere, and then because you also now you get a selection of this intersection, you can make like if you were welding, you know, you can make the metal there. That's pretty nice. So cool. Like a profile, or I guess you could also make a mesh, and you can all kinds of intersections, like water on a surface, or like jelly, or like, wow, now I want to play with it. Okay, next there is a improvement in performance on the separate XYZ node. Is now up to 20% in some common cases. Super welcome. Thank you, Jack. The user interface improvements in geometry nodes. This feature, actually, we talked about it in the Blender chat a while ago, and I'm super happy to see it finally implemented because it helps you understand geometry nodes a lot better. For example, I was looking at the old camera. Okay, I need to watch you here. Yes, have you ever wondered what kind of mesh or geometry data I can input in this socket? What is it? Because geometry can be anything, right? It can be volumes, curves, points, instances, anything. But some nodes only support certain types, right? Like the curve nodes only support curve stuff, but some support mesh and curves. Now it's gonna tell you in the tooltip which types it supports. That is amazing. This is gonna save so much time guessing or at least trying to understand the node tree. Another UI improvement is in the volume to mesh node. The threshold is now has changed. The minimum value has been removed because it didn't make sense in general, apparently. And now there is also a description, so you can see what it does. The description is values larger than the threshold are inside the generated mesh. Okay. Next. Oh, this one for Python people that make your own nodes. If you make your own, well, eventually it will also benefit everybody, like every node. So the nodes can have descriptions like a tooltip, right? The thing is that most of the nodes internally in Blender, they don't have a description yet. That's another thing that you can help if you want to contribute to Blender development without having to like go with something that you know that it's easy to achieve, feel accomplished. The change also affects the custom nodes, those that are done with Python. So, for example, in this demo by Monique, she has these nodes that have a description, and when you mouse over, you can actually see what they do. That's pretty cool, because in Blender, usually, hey, why is it open here? The nodes don't say anything. You see, it's like agregar un nodo al árbol activo. That's because I have the description in Spanish, because from home I usually stream in Spanish, not in English. So I have the UI set. Okay, let me disable that and set it back to English. No description. So yeah, basically it tells you add a node. Very useful, Blender. But that's something you can help with, to add tooltips to the nodes. Next, what else? Speaking of making life easier with user interface stuff, in the asset browser, the sidebar, in the source field in the sidebar now is going to show the current file icon if it's a local file. So at least you can see at a glance if it's and you also can get familiar with this icon in particular. Even though it just looks like a blend file and a pen, at least you can make the connection that you are working in a local file. What else? Some performance improvements in like something very generic, in like functions. Speed up multifunction procedure executor. What is this? All over the place, basically. And it's much faster, up to 50 to 60%. It's, for example, when many elements are processed together, it doesn't affect it so much. But when the use case is a single element processed at a time, you're gonna see this performance improvement. Then I think we can move into GPENCIL library override. Yes, GPENCIL. GPENCIL was the, how do you call it? It was the star of Annecy. Everybody was talking about GPENCIL. There was a feature film in Annecy that was made with Blender, Unicorn Wars. I don't know if you have heard of it, but Unicorn Wars is an animation, a full feature film, very graphic, made in Blender, and it was at Annecy. We watched it. It's incredible. And at the end it says made with Blender, 100% made with Blender. Even that's so cool that people like, it's out of them that they want to say that it was made with Blender. So thank you, Unicorn Wars. Next. Well, speaking of GPENCIL, yes, got derailed. You know how when you are in Blender in general, and when you want to move an object to a new layer, a new collection, you press M to move to a new collection, and then you immediately can start typing and giving it a name to the new collection. Super handy. Well, this wasn't the case in GPENCIL. When you would create a new layer, it would just say like this, GP layer, like this. When you're creating a new layer, that's maybe okay, because you can't expect maybe, well, you could give it a name actually, now that I think of it. But when moving to a new, for example, if you have selected a bunch of vertices here and you press M to move to a new layer, this new layer should be on top. Anyway, now it's gonna let you name it when you add it. the new layer is at the bottom and the new collection is at the top. Yeah, we need to change that because we purposely added the new collection button on the top. Otherwise, you run into the issue that, for example, if I have a layer that starts with N, then now the shortcut for N doesn't work anymore, like opening new layer and creating a new layer with the shortcut. And also, if the list is long, then it's going to make it hard to find this button. So this should be on the top. I need to remember this to tell the GPENCIL team. And what else? Performance improvements in line art. So multi-thread performance improvements when building the tree. The library overrides also had a lot of performance improvements, but not only that, it also had actual new overrides possible, such as background images for cameras. You can link a camera and override the background image, but keep everything else linked. Isn't that great? That's awesome. Does it mean it was a request by the Blender Studio, but does it mean that I can actually leave, I didn't test it, but that I can leave everything linked, like the lens data, the size, the zoom lens, everything, but only override the background images? That's amazing. Super cool. Let's see. Image and movie clip properties are also now overridable. So the movie clip properties are now, you can now override them when you link them. So cool to see the library overrides system growing. The other change is related to the 3D view. Now, when you create a new override from the 3D view, it's not going to bring a pop-up all the time for you to choose the root collection anymore. Now it's going to do it automatically for you if there is no other match. There's no reason to ask if there is just one option, right? So that has been improved. And also it will ensure that the linked reference of the newly override collections, overridden collections, are also removed from the view layer. All right, someone mentioned VSE somewhere there, Video Sequence Editor. There is a few changes, improvements. One of them is the preview transform auto keying improvements. This is mainly a bug fix that is fixing a lot of like bug reports, like fixes a bunch of issues, and there were a lot of related tasks about it as well when you were using auto keying in the preview transform. For example, if you move objects around from the preview itself. Next. Okay, the other one is also a bug fix in the video sequence editor, but it's a long awaited one. You may have run into the issue that if you have multiple strips and you wanted to transform them, some of them could get out of sync. Like you can see here, the effect is actually cool, but it was a bug. This is a bug. This shouldn't happen. I think we all agree that they should all move together. But anyway, this wasn't the case. That has been fixed. So if you run into that in the past, it is gone. Make sure you update your build. Let's talk about color management for a bit. There is a new color space called Filmic sRGB. And why do I have this here if it was... because the commit was from before, but it was actually published on June 2nd. Okay, yeah. A new color space, Filmic sRGB. A typical use is when you want to render with Filmic view transform, but composite an existing image in the background that should not be affected by the view transform. So your render is in Filmic, but the background is something else. That's when you may want to use it. And I think now we enter the potpourri section, because I have a lot of like one item in every section features, such as the clip editor, the default to average sort in dope sheet. So in the dope sheet, when you are doing motion tracking, you can see a list of the trackers and the errors, like the ones how much of an error, or like how precise a tracker is basically. And it's hard to get like fully 100% precise trackers, but the average, and if the error is not too bad, you can get away with it. There is now the sorting is by default inverse, so it's going to show the ones with the higher error on the top, so you can spot them more easily, and you can say, okay, this tracker has having issues. I either make it bigger, change the radio, or just pick another, just move it around and pick a higher contrast area, for example. All right. Next, another fix, but you may have run into this. This is related to XR, to VR, and you may have noticed, if you're using VR, that when switching action sets, there will be a flicker. There will be like a split second of flicker that you don't want it to happen, especially in VR. That has been fixed by Peter Kim. So very much welcome. There is also a few improvements in the add-on itself, in the inspect scene add-on. Okay, what else? This is a potpourri section. The Sphinx, this is Python documentation. Sphinx has been upgraded to 5.0.1. So if you write documentations, which you should, make sure that you keep up to date or updated. This one you may want to listen to if you make scripts, add-ons, and use the compositor. If you do all of this, you're probably familiar with the render handlers, the pre-render, post-render. So they are like actions or functions that you can attach to like before the render happens or after the render. For example, I remember before we had Simplify, and now I feel like an old fart. Before we had Simplify, I remember making my own crappy Simplify by attaching some settings to the pre-render. So you press F12 to render, pre-render. The pre-render handler will change some settings, render, and then in the post-render handler, I would set those settings back to how they were. The poor man's Simplify system. Okay, that is now this concept of pre and post and cancel is now part of the compositor as well. You can do pre, composite, post, or even cancel, because there is also now a new syntax that adds a composite as a job type. So you can request it. If the job type that is running is composite, do something. So yay for that. Python stuff. If you do Python, you also maybe compile Blender. So when you compile Blender, you can also disable stuff, and that is amazing because you can compile faster. Well, now you can compile OBJ, STL, and even GPENCIL SVG support or PDF support. So if you don't use those features and you want to compile faster, now you can remove them. Okay, let's talk a little bit about input and output. I forgot the going into another section. Sound. Okay. It is cool to see that Blender is moving a lot of, well, the community of developers are moving a lot of its import, export Python scripts into C++ for actual speed. We've seen it happening with the OBJ importer and exporter, and now it's happening with the STL importer. There is a new experimental STL importer that is roughly between 7 and 9 times faster than the Python based one. So yay for that. It's experimental. You can find it in the menu next to the rest. If you go to File and you do like Import, you're gonna find the STL experimental next to Wavefront experimental and the other ones. And this is so cool because it means that it's now native. So in theory, this should make it easier to like when you drag and drop files to detect it. Because one of the reasons why the drag and drop and OBJ thing wasn't implemented is that OBJ was a Python, still is now a Python add-on, basically. The same with FBX, it's in Python, made in Python. That means that it's an add-on. That means that when you drag and drop a file, you have to check if the add-on is installed, and you have to do all kinds of checks. You can't just assume that it's there, unlike with more built-in approaches like this one. So yay for that, yay for built-in. And one day, the unified importer and exporter. Next, speaking of OBJ, there is now vertex color support or color attribute support in the importer and the exporter. So yay, color attribute. Actually, somebody at Annecy reported this to me in live, real life. So I'm happy to see that it actually got fixed. The other change that was done to the OBJ importer is that undo has been enabled for the experimental importer, and also to match the Python exporter, the file name of the file, the name of the file is going to be used as the default object's name. So it no longer have a generic name. It's going to now match the Python importer, which does gives a file name to the object name. All right, enough OBJ. Another importer exporter that got improvements, in this case the importer of USD. An exporter. So when you export USD, you can specify settings. You want to export this and that, whatever works in your workflow. The thing is, the next time you export something, you have to reset all those settings, and that's not so cool. So now the second time you run the export is going to use the previous settings that you chose. So it's going to be more consistent, and you don't have to reset everything again. So I assume this is going to save you hours, days of your life in the overall context. Another improvement in the import of USDs is now when there are material names that have the same name and they collide, this will be handled properly. They're going to be made unique, or you can reference existing. So it's going to, if the name already matches, it's going to use that one, which makes it super cool. Super duper. Improvements again in USD, but this is performance. So when you import large USD files, the improvement is insane. So for example, here in the demo, Moana USD scene with around 260,000 objects and 18,000 materials, the improvement saves around 6 minutes. I don't know what was the other time. Unfortunately, the developer here doesn't mention it, but I don't know what. Okay, from 16 minutes down to 10 minutes, which is not too bad. No, but it's not in the commit log. Also, I don't know how scientific this is. I don't know how fast is the computer, but it's good to see that it went down so much. Because not only the USD import was improved, but also the Alembic and USD imports have been improved in a separate commit.
So both of them now import. Again, okay, now we know the computer. We know it's an AMD Ryzen 5950X, so top of the line, super good, multi-threaded, I guess, has to do something with it. And it saves around 22 minutes. Yeah, but from what? From how much was... It doesn't say, but the thing that it just saves 22 minutes, okay, I like that. But from what? From like 3 days? Yeah, unfortunately, I don't have the actual numbers. But hey, saving 22 minutes, I'll take that. I'll take that. If it would take 23 minutes and it saved 22, okay, that I would like. Although it's nice to see that they're using the Moana USD scene as an example, so actual production files. Okay, let's talk a little bit before I'm gonna have some water because we are running out of time. 6:10. And I have conference voice, festival voice, where you are talking to people in loud places for hours, trying to sell something that you can't sell. So how do you sell Blender when there's nothing to sell? Have you tried Blender? Add-ons. Let's talk a little bit about add-ons. After Effects. We don't say that word that often. Oh no, I didn't save the actual number, or I made a mistake. Okay, After Effects. The After Effects add-on has had a number of improvements. I can name 3 of them. So one of them is my favorite, Comet Still Parsing. What do you mean still parsing? Okay, let's go manually to the history and let's hope. Okay, here they are. I found them. So the ones that I actually wanted to highlight, and for some reason it didn't work, it's the one that allows you to export multiple cameras using markers. This one. Look at this. Amazing. If you're using After Effects, previously you could only export one camera at a time. Now you have... if you use markers for the cameras, you can export multiple cameras at once. If a camera is used multiple times through a shot, as many cameras with the same name will be exported. It's good to know. Thanks, Damia. Next, I think I'm gonna just browse them here. You can see the amount of changes that were done to the After Effects add-on. Another one that was interesting was that it grouped images and solids into a folder. So now it's gonna put them in a folder. And the other one was that, yeah, if you use hide render in Blender, like the option to hide the objects from the render, this will be imported in, will be exported to After Effects as opacity. So yeah, what's wrong with his voice? Is my voice different than normal? Sorry, I've been talking to people for a whole week about Blender. It was good, but adds a toll to someone's voice. Next, change. The Gltf importer now use color attribute API instead of the Vertex color. So the reason I wanted to highlight this is in case you are an add-on creator and you are using the Vertex colors, the old Vertex color API. This way you can go to this link in the description of this video. You're gonna find all the links to everything that I'm browsing here. This commit in particular is very interesting because you can just basically see here what Julian did and just like, okay, this is how it used to be, this is how it is now. A mesh dot color attributes and access this using the new API, just to make it easier to move into the new system. All right, time to talk a bit about fixes, and I think I'm close to calling it a day because, okay, why would I wasn't look interested. This website fabricator sometimes asks me to log in, sometimes it doesn't. So performance improvements, this is more like a fix, like a performance. The outliner could sometimes get really slow when trying to build the trees. Like for example, when you're searching for something, it could get very slow because it was trying to build more than it needed apparently. So the performance in a test from Sprite Fright, the Blender Open Movie, now went from, for example, it reduced the outliner tree rebuilding from 45 milliseconds to 12 or 17 milliseconds in average. That's fantastic. That's more than twice as fast. The next one, it's actually even more impressive. In library overrides display mode and hierarchies mode, the tree building went from 5 to 6 seconds just to wait for the outliner tree to appear to 220 milliseconds. That's amazing. I love it. Okay. What else? There's been a fix in dynamic paint that I wanted to mention in case you're using dynamic paint and you may have noticed that some attributes, some normals were not updating properly. Get the latest alpha because that has been fixed. Also, if you are on Linux and use Wayland and had issues with Blender in the past, it's completely understandable because Blender forever didn't have good Wayland support. But I counted like between 20 and 30 commits changes related to Wayland support, like Blender supporting Wayland on Linux. It's one of them, dropping files. It's not gonna crash anymore. If you drag and drop a file, it doesn't crash. Yay. But also support for new stuff. And even it could happen that the window would close when dropping files in GNOME Shell 42. So yay for that. There are so many Wayland. If you just search for Wayland and change and look for the closed and commits, like diffusion commit, for example, you're gonna see like all these commits that happen recently. It's awesome. These are all by Campbell mainly. Actually, if you on a Sunday, Campbell, why? Anyway, you can see the list. Wayland has a future in Blender. Blender in Wayland. Wayland, of course, has a future and a present. It's actually the default environment now in some distros. All right, about to close it. So let's talk a little bit about experimental stuff such as curves. Curves now have soft selection, also known as the proportional editing type of selection that you can enable in other areas of Blender. Well, soft selection is basically instead of being either something selected on or off, is like a float selection. So something can be partially selected and then you can have you can affect certain areas that way. You can transform, it's like proportional editing, but now in sculpt mode for hairs. Another change, the attaching curves to a mesh now is going to use the UV coordinates system, the attributes. Then the delete geometry node, well, actually many nodes have been ported into the new system. I'm not going to list them all, but for example, the delete geometry node uses the new curve types. And lastly, the curves, the operators in this curve mode they can be added to the keymap, so you can customize your own shortcuts for working with curves. And I think that's it. I think I said everything that I wanted to mention. I think I did, yes. It's 20 minutes past 6, so I think I need to wrap it up. I hope you, oh gee, look at how, because here I'm using still the old camera. Okay, let me try and fix it. And no, it's just gonna take forever. Okay, let me see. 5, 4, 3, let me see if I can fix it. Okay, there, cool. It's so weird. You don't want to know what I'm doing here. I'm actually just trying to, yeah, if you use OBS, you know what I'm talking about. You try to change the scene that is not live streaming, but anyway. Next week, I hope to be back at the Blender studio with my right setup, with everything working correctly. And now I have to actually cut this, stop this and prepare the live stream, maybe hopefully fix the camera to prepare it for Blender Hoy in Spanish. So I need to wrap it up. I hope you're having a fantastic time. I hope you're trying Blender 3.2 that came out last week, 2 weeks ago, and use it to make stuff. I got so inspired by Annecy. Everybody's using Blender for so many weird things. We saw the Deuce, the creator of this amazing art. Yes. So many more people. Danny, feature films made with Blender, games like Blender used for games, Blender used for VR, Blender used for all kinds of stuff. Studios with hundreds of people. It's crazy. All right, let's talk a little bit more about it next week with a bit more time at the Blender studio. Now I gotta wrap up, so stay tuned. Happy blending. See you next week, same place, same time for another Blender Today live. It wasn't even that loud. Not even that loud, right? See you, have fun, happy blending.